Well, this is the last podcast that I'm going to record in my studio. Man, I don't know even what to say. There's so much. I mean, I decided not to use my camera, mostly because I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have to worry about editing video, doing little video bits that I've done in past. I got into podcasting because I liked the idea of doing audio and playing with audio and having conversations. And I think the video thing came out of an idea that nobody wants to just listen to me ramble and listen to my voice for any extended period of time. And I think that I need to get over that, because I think I've clearly built an entire persona that is based on my voice and my thoughts and my personality. And so, I stopped doing my a bit much video series because I didn't want to do all the work. I didn't want to do the videos. I didn't want to have to sit down and edit. It's just so much, and I don't have the time or the energy. I guess really I don't have the passion for it. I would make the time and the energy if I really wasn't passionate by the project, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I just wasn't getting enough attention. I thrive off of attention and instant gratification. I stopped writing the Penny Lich after episode 10, even though I had promised I was going to write 12. And then my editor started editing episode 10. As soon as he started making notes and telling me how much he liked it, I started thinking about writing episode 11. I think I'm someone that just I'm someone that requires people to watch me to justify what I'm doing. It's how I find the validation in doing it. I feel like there's so many people out there that know what they want to do, or at least they know what enjoyment they get out of doing something, and they don't need other people's approval. They don't need people to tell them that they're doing a good job. I'm not one of those people. I'm just not. I require constant, adoration. I don't think that's true, because I've never really gotten much adoration for what I do. I mean, a little bit, little hits here and there of the dopamine drug of acceptance and praise, but nothing substantial. I mean, as an example, I went by my grandma's house earlier today. She's been going through a tough time, and I had given her a book that featured one of my stories in it. It's an anthology, and the concept was the editor for this anthology, the publisher. He basically took the poem from Ecclesiastes that says there's a season for anything, a time for everything. And in that poem, it has like a bunch of a time for laughter, a time for weeping, a time for sowing, a time for reaping, a time for death, a time for life, for birth. It does that for a long, long time. and I was given a time to laugh. And the story that I wrote was one of the saddest I've ever written, because the time to laugh, it wasn't about being as funny as possible. I had to go back and add some humor to it because people were really confused. The time to laugh was a moment shared by two people that became the most consequential moment for them both. And my grandma read this story. I don't know if she read any of the other stories in the anthology, but she read this story. She read my story. And like a grandma should, she praised it and told me how good it was. She said the same thing 10 years ago when I self-published my POS first draft of a fantasy novel, one that I'm still trying to rewrite and make good. She read that 10 years ago and she told me that I was a good writer, that there was a lot of potential, a lot of promise, that I did certain things right, that she didn't like everything, and it was a little hard to read in some places. But today, when she read this short story I had written, she said, I understand. I get it now. You are a good writer. You have grown so much. You've got a bright future ahead of you. And that was awesome. That was great. And that's what I live for, right? Is people telling me that. That's why, not live for. I don't live for that. I live for other reasons, I guess. But that's what I write for. That's why I podcast for. I don't understand. I feel like I've gotten pretty good at podcasting. I feel like I've learned how to create audio and to have conversation and to project stories and ideas, and I can produce, right? Like with writing, I can't produce as much. I have a hard time writing a short story in a month. In a podcast, I'll have this done tonight, right? I sit down, edit it, do a little bit of work on it. If I was doing stories, audio books, narration, audio dramas, even that, I know that I could produce that pretty quickly and efficiently and pretty well. I've put that to the test. And I don't understand why I wasn't paid attention to more. I mean, there are people that noticed. I've got very good friends who have noticed. We're friends because they noticed. But I wanted more. I wanted to make this an income. I wanted to make this my life. And maybe that's my problem, is that I just assumed that if I'm good at something and I like doing it, that it would just work out. For the many talented artists and authors and creatives that go on to live lavish lives, there's 1,000 that don't amount to shit. And I worry every day that I'm going to be one of those shit ones. I worry that the best that's going to happen is after I'm dead, people will notice me. I don't want that. I want to talk to people about stories and podcasts and ideas and things that I make. I want to talk about ideas that I have that I can put into words. and they affect people. My studio is closing down, but it's not the end of my business. But the business is not really me. I own a business, but I'm not really a business owner. I don't own it. I don't really do much with it. I produce, right? My partner, he's the one that does most of the work. He's the one that brings in most of the money. I feel like an employee more than anything. But I don't feel like a business owner. And people for the last 4 or 5 years they've looked at me and said, oh, we're so proud of you. We're so proud of how far you've come along. We're so proud of the fact that you've been able to create something that nobody else can. Studio? Who's done that? Well, a lot of people have, and they've done it more successfully than me. They know what they're doing. They have connections. They have a drive that I guess I just don't have. And I want to do better. I guess I make excuses, and maybe that's what I always do. I don't have time. I don't have energy. I don't have the money. Those are all the things I want. Those are all the things that I've been fighting for 4 years, working for myself and doing my own thing on the side for almost no money. I've been trying to get back some time because I got a kid now. Because I got a wife. But I spend all my time at the studio when I'm not at work, so I don't have time. I want more energy. I want to work out. I want to lose weight. But I'm stuck behind a monitor working on things I don't have a passion for because they're not really bringing me anything. People keep telling me that it's not a failure. This is just a step forward. And I get it. I do. And I try to be optimistic about it. I guess I try for other people's sake. But I'm sad. It is a failure. I mean, if I had just done more, if I had just been better, I wouldn't be closing down shop. At worst, we'd be moving to somewhere better, right? I know nobody likes to call it a failure because that's, I don't know. Because we all know that we move on. We all know that life goes on. And to call it a failure seems too final. So we call it a bump in the road, a step, a new direction. But my hope still remains. I want to find a way to not have to break my back to provide for my family. Not have to hate getting out of bed to go do something. I want to live life. I want to make enough money that I can pay off my student loans. I can take my wife and kid to Disneyland, to get us a hotel at the coast or something. Like I don't want the world. I don't want I just want to live. I want time to be able to enjoy the things that I want to do, so that I can turn the camera on and I can edit video and audio again. So I can write and I can publish and I can go to Comic-Cons and have a booth and sit in front of people and talk to them. Why is it so hard? Why is that so hard? At what point in life did we all decide that you can't just do what you like? Of course, there are people that get that, right? There are people that are enjoying their life, that they've worked hard and they get what they want, and they get to enjoy the things that come along with that. And I, along the way, diverted from that path. And maybe it happened when I was a teenager. Maybe it happened when I was 18 and someone sat me in front of a computer and said, "Here you go, kid. Go rack up a shit ton of debt and go get a degree in something that you're never going to make money in, so that 10 years later, you can go back to school and find a way to make money killing yourself and still be in debt and still ache every day for freedom." Maybe that's when it happened. Maybe it's when I decided that I didn't want to continue this career path, as I didn't want to continue going to school for film and design, because I wanted to be home with my girlfriend, now my wife, because I loved her more than I loved the idea of being a cameraman for the local news. Maybe I just didn't meet the right people. I'm just not good at networking and being in front of people. I just didn't do it well enough. Maybe I'm just too nice, right? I'm not willing to screw other people over. I'm not willing to steal or lie or cheat to get what I want. And that's what you need to do. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot in the last few years. I've changed a lot in the last few years. I think that who I was when I married my wife, I think he'd be excited about the things that I've tried to do, that I have done. I think he'd be disappointed about how demoralizing my achievements feel. When I first married my wife, I was working 2 jobs at a retail store and a t-shirt printing shop. I learned how to do okay graphic design there. It's like the fast food of graphic design. That's what I tell people whenever they're like, "Hey, can you design stuff?" I say yeah, I can, and I can do it probably pretty quick. The problem is it's not going to be that good. It's like a McDonald's compared to, like, I don't know, a Gordon Ramsay burger. I can't think of a good burger place at the moment that doesn't seem cheap suddenly. Like Chick-fil-A I get is good, but I just, is a part of this analogy? I don't know. A good burger joint Red Robin. I don't know. Again, that's like somebody out there is going to be like, oh, you like Red Robin. It's like, come on. I'm just trying to make a point here. The point is, I can do it and it will work. It is food. It's not the best food. I don't do the best design, but I can do it fast. I got really good at that while I was working at the t-shirt shop. And while I was working at the retail store in the electronics department, I made some really good friends. And at that point, I learned about podcasting. And man, I dove in deep. I convinced my brother to do a show where we argue about nerd stuff, and that only made it a few episodes. And then I tried to rope everybody I possibly could into recording with me. People at the t-shirt shop, people at the electronics store, and it just, nothing really stuck. And then I quit the electronics store and just worked the t-shirt shop, which was a terrible idea. By the way, I was making like no money at all. It wasn't even full-time. And I was a husband at that point. Like, I had just gotten married. And my buddy who was at the electronics store, he and I decided to start paying a guy to let us use his studio, his recording studio, to record a podcast. And it was so fun. It was so stupid. But it was awesome. It's just us being stupid. Fun jokes. We invented a game. And I have it printed somewhere. I found it the other day. And then, man, I tried a few different things. You know, I left the t-shirt shop to go for another t-shirt shop, and that didn't work out at all. Kind of had a whole shift in my, I don't know what to call it, pathos, philosophy. I realized I'd been taking the easy way out a lot. And I wanted to change that. And I had an opportunity to take another job at a call center that I knew was going to be easy, but I'd probably be fired from within a year. And then I was offered a job at the same time with a delivery company that pissed me off, man. First day, I didn't even realize what was happening. I just went to an quote-unquote interview. And it ended up being just a full day of work. And then they handed me a wad of cash and said, this is how much money you just made today. And that got my attention. Broke my back, made some money. I could take care of my wife that way. And I did that for like a year and a half. And eventually, my brother and my cousin sat me down and said, hey man, you're too smart for this. You need to not kill yourself making $13 an hour. Work half as much and make 3 times as much. And I thought, that sounds like a good deal to me, but I am an artist. I'm a designer. I'm an author. I'm a t-shirt printer. I'm a podcaster. I'm a video guy, videographer who didn't own a camera or a computer. So I joined. It took a while, but I got in, and man, it sucked ass. And I hated it from day one. I hated it. But I made it 3 years, and I got my journeyman's license. And now I'm proud of that fact. And a couple years later, I've got 2 more certifications, and I'm proud of that fact. I'm proud of the things that I've done to take care of myself and my wife and my son. I'm proud of being able to say I did the hard work. I broke my back. I didn't really break my back. I'm just being facetious, hyperbolic. I did really mess up my knees, though. Like, so bad. Messed up my knees. Paid for food. All this time spent delivering furniture, eventually joining the apprenticeship and then becoming a journeyman. I wanted to podcast and write throughout that whole time. So I roped a couple of friends into a podcast, and we did a couple episodes, and it didn't take. It was kind of bad. But one of them is a really good guy, really smart guy who said, "Man, you have a talent for producing audio, and I really appreciate that. And I have a talent for writing the news. So let's put a little bit of chocolate in your peanut butter and let's make something new." And as I say that, that is gross. That's a gross thing to say, chocolate in your peanut butter. But the point is, it's like a Reese's cup is the idea. And we started our news podcast, and man, that barely went anywhere. I mean, it was great at first. It was fun. I mean, from the get-go, we had problems with time commitments and things, and it was, but it was okay. We could see the future. We could see it making money, and not just a little bit. We could see it making real money. And it started to make enough money, and people were getting interested in my work as a producer enough that we were basically required to open up some space, because the basement out in the middle of the forest where we were recording things at this point was not sufficient as a professional space. So we got lucky, and one of the guys we interviewed on the show happened to have a little room in the corner of his master suite of a business building, and we took it, and we paid a third of the rent, and we made our studio inside this little room. My desk, the podcast table, everything fit in this teeny tiny little 12 by 8 room. The room I'm sitting in right now, actually. And it was fun. It was really fun. Eventually, our lease mates, our roommates, lost their incredible minds and basically dropped off the face of the earth. So we were left with pretty big rent and 3 rooms that we were occupying one of. We made a deal. Someone came in, took one of the rooms. We took 2, and we have now our producer's room, because there's a window that goes into this little 12 by 8 room, and that window goes out into we'll call it a receptionist area. So we took that receptionist area, and that became the producer's area. You can see right into the recording area, and it was awesome. There was a moment then when we moved all of that out there, and I got it all set up. I had my recording gear out there. We had run some wire, and I'd done a little bit of decorating inside, and there's a moment where I just sat at my desk, and I just thanked God for giving me this experience. I had stumbled onto podcasting 10 years ago. Some rando person wanted me on their show, and I fell in love hard. And now I had my own studio. I had a desk, I had a table, I had a window from one room into another. It was awesome. I was surrounded by comic books and an arcade cabinet and vintage vinyl records and guitars and posters and microphones. I was genuinely happy. And I started another podcast with a friend. We became friends through the podcast, actually. We barely knew each other getting started, but we had met through the news show, and she had a knack for actually reading books, and I had a knack for pretending like I read books and wanting to sound smart. So we started Between Lewis and Lovecraft. God, that's such a good show. Between Lewis and Lovecraft is probably the single most important project I've ever worked on in my entire life. Between authoring several books, starting a podcast that actually paid for our studio, Between Lewis and Lovecraft with Hannah was the most fun I ever had producing audio or video or anything. Ever. It was the most fun I ever had producing anything. I got to read books and regurgitate all of this information that I had in my brain into the world, and people listened to it and they enjoyed it. Can you imagine what that's like for a guy like me to spill words into a microphone? People receive those words and then go, well done, good job. And I was doing what I loved, reading and writing and growing and talking. Hannah became like a sister to me because she just listened to me talk, and then she would make fun of me. She would challenge me. It was awesome. The best thing I ever produced. Except maybe my son, obviously. I made so many friends through that show. I was validated for being alive by that show, which is a terrible thing to say about something that exists outside of yourself. But it's the truth. I wouldn't have the friends that I have now if it wasn't for that show. I wouldn't have the pathos that I have now if it wasn't for that show. I wouldn't have the experience of producing audio, stories, of learning who I really am without Between Lewis and Lovecraft. So then I started a new show. Playing Dungeons and Dragons. We played Dungeons and Dragons, and I learned that I am not the best at playing D&D. I learned that I'm not the best at running a team of people. I'm not the best at producing very large files of audio and trying to work them down. I don't know where I went wrong, but it was a massacre of my ego. I had to quit eventually because the stress of trying to produce a show while playing D&D was so much that I didn't even enjoy Dungeons and Dragons, which is arguably my favorite thing in the world. I enjoyed the process of building a team and watching us grow closer. I did not enjoy the process of watching us fall away. There's something about creating content that will eventually live beyond you, potentially. That you don't think about it in the moment. You think about what you're doing and the moment that you're in. And then when you go back and you re-listen to it, you realize how shitty it was. How shitty you were to your own friends. It's cathartic. Because I already knew I was a shitty friend. I know I am. But to have audio proof of it, I don't know. It's a hard lesson to learn. We've talked about doing it again, but it's, I don't know. It's work. It's energy. It's time. And I don't have those. The Canby show, the news show that I do, we hit a point where people were interested in us. They were interested in listening to our show, but people sponsoring us didn't work as much. And I think part of that is we're not salesmen. We don't have the ability to sell ourselves well enough, and it's a skill that we didn't want to learn. Maybe it's something we do need to. The company still exists. The hope that we can come back and keep doing news is still there. But not in this place. You know, we had people coming in to read twice a week. And then we scaled it back to once a week. And then the people coming in to read decided they didn't want to read anymore. It's too tedious. It wasn't what they wanted to do anymore. So I started reading again. And it became tedious. And then my writers started to not be able to write. And that became tedious. You can only be passionate about something for so long before the lack of validation starts to take hold. And in this case, doing the news for a city that didn't want us to do that, and proof of that being in the lack of people wanting to support it, we lost our passion for it. There was one really fun event that we did. I got a real big kick out of it. And that was Halloween a few years ago. It was during the pandemic. And we were approached by the local fairgrounds because they were putting on a drive-through horror house of sorts. Like you drove through like the fairgrounds, and people were setting up haunted houses then and event like displays and stuff. And so you just drive your car through, and scary things would pop out and chase your car and stuff. It was awesome. I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty great. But people knew that if there's a line of cars out the street, the people are going to be waiting for a while. So they approached us to make a show, basically, for a couple hours long show that people could tune into it on their radio. They would have a local transmitter, and they could tune into a specific radio station, and this 2-hour long show would be on loop. So when you come in, you can come in at any time and just be listening to it. And we had some Halloween themed music, some lo-fi, we had trivia, we had some stories from the Between Lewis and Lovecraft Halloween show. Like we put a whole thing together, and it was so much fun. That was probably one of the funnest things I've ever done, because then we packed the kids up into the minivan, and we all went to the scare fair, whatever it was called, and we listened to it, and it was there, and we were watching other people playing along with the trivia questions that we were doing, and we were watching people dance and in their cars, and it was just a moment where, oh my God, I had an effect on an entire community of people. This thing that I did in my little studio. That's what I want to do. I want to affect people. I want to make people have emotions, and I want to make people feel things, if only just for a minute. If only just to get them out of themselves. That's why I want to write. That's why I want to produce podcasts. That's why I want to do videos. That's why I want, to go to Comic-Cons and see weird people dressed in weird costumes and congratulate them on being awesome. I look forward to the future. I don't know what it's going to look like. We could close down studio, or we will be closing down the studio, but then we could close down the whole company. And I've learned enough to know that I am not the guy that's going to be able to start something new. I'm just not. I'm not the leader that's needed to kick something off. I wanted to be. Tried to start a t-shirt company, tried to start a publishing company, tried to start a podcast company, like 4 of them. Tried to do all kinds of stuff. And it just didn't work. But what I really think I'm good at is affecting people. If I'm given the right time and energy and money. And maybe I never will. But I gotta hope, right? At the very least, that I'll be able to affect my son's life. If I have more kids, their lives. That I can affect my wife's life. Make it good. Make it better. So do I just give up all this? and say that affecting their life is good enough. Being there with them is good enough. This is the last podcast I will ever record in this studio. And it feels freeing. And it feels like I've done something. If only for a minute.